Welcome to Season 4 of My Wife the Dietitian, a fun, evidence-based weekly podcast about nutrition and healthy living. On today's show, we're talking to Brian Bentow from Saucy. Brian shares his inspiring story of how he used his health to create a line of allergy-free sauces. It's a fascinating story. We encourage you all to stick around. Enjoying the show? You can help others find it and enjoy it too by giving us a 5-star rating or review. If you feel like reaching out to us with a question or comment, you can send us an email at mywifetherd@gmail.com. And don't forget to visit our website at mywifethedietitian.com, as well as our social media pages. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Enjoy the show. Welcome to My Wife the Dietitian. Hello, Sandra.
Hi, Rob.
How's it going?
Did you get that right?
I did.
I'm just teasing.
It's just rhymes off my tongue like I've said it a few times before. So,
you have. We're 3.5 years, I think we've been doing this weekly podcast.
There we go.
Pretty awesome. And today we're interviewing Brian Bentow from Saucy. That's his product line of allergen-friendly sauces that he's developed. Well, he's helped the chef develop and has put them to market, and it's a brand new business, and it's really exciting to hear
the whole story of how it evolved. And it's a fascinating story with some really, really interesting information. We encourage you to listen to the whole thing. It's a longer episode, but it's really, really interesting. And Brian was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. Is that?
Yes.
And can you explain it a little bit, maybe for our listeners, what Crohn's is specifically?
Absolutely. We get into this with the episode, but I don't think we actually describe or define what Crohn's is. So I just want to explain that. It is an intestinal bowel disease that often gets lumped in with ulcerative colitis or Crohn's, and Crohn's can affect someone's small or large intestine, anywhere in the GI tract, actually. And it's generally considered an autoimmune disease with, it's characterized by the body's immune system mistakenly attacking the digestive tract. And then that causes inflammation and a whole host of symptoms. And that is what you'll hear about with Brian's story, and then how he has used his journey and health scare to develop a line of sauces that are allergen friendly and that meets his criteria in terms of foods that are acceptable for him to eat without causing an inflammation.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really great episode. We talk about like how did his diet change help his autoimmune condition and what that meant, and like what are some breakfast foods or what are some lunch and dinner things that he can eat without having an inflammatory response. And it's so interesting to hear his journey and hear that, you know, with how he's following his diet, it's something that's for him, he needs to do it. It's just like someone who has celiac and needs to avoid gluten, or someone who has a peanut allergy and cannot be exposed to peanuts. Like he just basically, the food intolerances that he has like taken to the extreme in terms of the seriousness of his health depending on it. So it's so interesting hearing from a person who's gone through this. And we have had listener questions come up about people having Crohn's and asking, you know, what do I do? I can't eat this and I can't eat this. And so this might give you some more information in terms of what someone who has Crohn's and who has been dealing with this condition, what they do.
Exactly. And even if you're someone who doesn't suffer from these conditions, it's still a fascinating episode to listen to. And Brian's story is super inspiring. It's
like transformational.
It really is. Yeah. So we encourage you to listen to it and let us know what you think. And definitely check out his products. We'll link those in the show notes, and we'll be talking about them quite a bit through the episode as well. But make sure to check his stuff out. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Brian Bentow from Saucy.
Thanks so much, Brian, for joining Rob and I today on the podcast. And I'm so excited to talk to you about your story and your product, Get Saucy. I just love the name. And that's what actually attracted me to this whole thing is the name of your sauce, Get Saucy, is awesome, but it comes from your whole experience. And I really would love it if you let the listeners know like who you are and what you are doing.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys for inviting me to the podcast. So my name is Brian Bentow, and I'm the CEO of Get Saucy. And we make sauces and seasonings for people with autoimmune diseases, food allergies, or just want to eat super clean. And it all started for me in around 2018 when I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And my gastroenterologist recommended that I go on Entyvio. And I really don't like to take medication, despite the fact that both my parents are pharmacists and my grandfather, second cousin, and great uncle are all pharmacists. And I worked in a pharmacy for 4 years.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that part. Okay, sorry. That's interesting.
Yeah. I'm sort of a little bit of a black sheep in that regard. And I had a really bad experience actually in college where I was using my computer a lot and I didn't have an ergonomic setup. And I developed something like carpal tunnel. And I went to a doctor and he prescribed ibuprofen, anti-inflammatories. And that enabled me to work through the pain. But then my injury became much, much more severe. And it forced me to think about understanding the root cause and how my doctor didn't ask me, hey, tell me about your life, tell me about how you use your computer, tell me, to really figure out the root cause. And from that initial experience in college, I've always had a little bit of a focus on, figuring out the root cause. So when I was diagnosed with Crohn's, I didn't want to just jump to, medication. I wanted to understand the root cause. And I had a family friend, who recommended going to a functional medicine doctor named Dr. Garcia. So I visited him and he told me about the autoimmune protocol diet and that it had helped quite a few of his other patients. And he also wanted to sell me some supplements that were $250 a month. And I said, hold on, let's focus on one thing at a time. Let's try to troubleshoot this. I don't really want to start signing up for very expensive supplements. I just want to try the diet on its own and also, introduce as few variables as possible. And when I first started the diet, I said, okay, I'll do the diet 6 days a week. And on the seventh day, I'll have a cheat day. That's generally how people think about diets.
Right.
That did not work. And I really struggled because I didn't understand why it wasn't working. Every single time I would have the cheat day, I would have a flare up, and it would take me a week or so to get back to homeostasis.
Wow.
And then I started just, I'd be getting woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning in pain, and I would read, Reddit posts, YouTube blogs, Facebook blogs. I was in a bunch of different groups, and I read just in a random comment that this is not a diet that you can have a cheat day. You have to be 100% compliant. And from that point onwards, I said, okay, I'm going to recommit to this and I'm going to do it 100% of the time. And I'll do it for, 30 days or 60 days and see what happens. And then my results were pretty immediate. After a couple weeks of getting back to homeostasis, all my symptoms resolved. My rashes on my elbows went away. I wasn't having trouble breathing through my nose at night. And I didn't have the pain that I wasn't being woken up with pain in the middle of the night. And eventually I got a blood test and a stool test, and my inflammation went down by over 90%.
Wow.
And I went back to my gastroenterologist and I showed him my results. And he said, oh my gosh, this is amazing. He said, which treatment are you on again? And I said, no treatment. And he said, no, which medication? And I said, no medication. And he said, well, what are you doing? And I said, I'm doing the autoimmune protocol diet. And he said, well, if you were on the medication and you had these results, I would be ecstatic. So I asked him,
Wow.
why didn't you tell me about the diet? I had to learn about it from a functional medicine doctor. And he said, well, first of all, I'm not a registered dietitian. And 40 years ago, when I went to med school, I got a book this thick, and only one page was on nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
And over the last 40 years, I've only had one other patient with Crohn's who've did a diet and had a similar outcome as you. And I even did a colonoscopy on him, and his gut had completely healed.
Wow.
However, about a year later, he got tired of doing the diet, tired of cooking from scratch, and he went back to eating the way he was eating before, and his symptoms came back with a vengeance.
Hmm.
And so that's why I don't recommend the diet to anyone, because I don't think it's sustainable. Of course, if I had been diagnosed with celiac disease, he would have told me to do the gluten-free diet, and it would be the end of the story.
Right.
And 50 years ago, doctors didn't know that if you have celiac disease, all you need to do is avoid gluten. And doctors were prescribing anti-inflammatories, steroids, and even doing surgeries on patients. And then it was discovered that, you could just avoid gluten and grains. I saw this book called No Grain, No Pain. And then the first gluten-free company came out, Glutino. And now when you go to the grocery store, there's hundreds or even thousands of gluten-free products that you can find on Amazon and so forth. And it's become a lot easier for people to stick to a gluten-free diet, and it's relatively easy to manage. However, I wondered why the same thing hasn't happened for Crohn's disease and other autoimmune diseases. And part of it is, as I've learned, I was so excited about my success, and I told everybody. I told people, hey, I did the autoimmune protocol and I'm good now. And then some people came back and said, no, 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 no. The autoimmune protocol, that's not the ticket. It's you should do the raw vegan diet. My wife has Crohn's and she did the raw vegan diet. And then I would talk to other people and they would say, no, 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 no. You need to do Whole30. That's the ticket. Or the carnivore diet. I saw a guy on YouTube, he did the carnivore diet and all of his autoimmune symptoms went away, or the specific carbohydrate diet. So I was starting to get kind of confused and I was wondering, well, do all these diets work? And as I started to think about it, I realized, what do these diets have in common?
Mm-hmm.
What does the carnivore diet and the raw vegan diet have in common? At first glance, it doesn't seem like they have anything in common. But if you think about it, both avoid processed foods. They both involve foods that humans have been eating for hundreds of thousands of years, depending on how long you think humans have been around.
Mm-hmm.
And they omit, they're both elimination diets. And I think that depending on what you're eating on those diets and what your particular food allergies are, they can work. So I'm sort of diet agnostic at this point. I don't have a religion when it comes to diets. I've met people. I met a woman whose mom had rheumatoid arthritis and her hand was, all crippled, and she stopped eating nightshades, which have solanine, and within a relatively short period of time, her hand went back to normal without medication. And so that was really, part of the journey that I've gone through and really trying to understand autoimmune disease and how diet is related. If I had a peanut allergy, my doctors would say, stop eating peanuts, avoid peanuts. If I had an allergy to shellfish, I would be told, stop eating shellfish. But for some reason, if you have an allergy to solanine, from tomatoes and other nightshades, doctors aren't really telling patients, hey, you should figure out what your allergies are and avoid them. So that kind of led me to, a journey of 3 years of cooking all of my meals from scratch. And I would go to the grocery store using some recipe I found online, and I'd get a laundry list of ingredients. I'd come home, make a giant mess, stink up the entire house, and then my wife would come over and try my food, and she's like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And then I'd have to eat my food sitting in a corner staring at a wall because nobody wanted to smell or see my food, or sometimes I'd have to eat it outside. And I'm just a terrible cook. I'm probably 2 or 3 standard deviations below the average when it comes to cooking.
So funny.
And On my second date with my wife, I asked her to come over to my place. I bought a jar of Thai curry sauce from Trader Joe's and some chicken, red bell peppers. I didn't have allergies at the time, cilantro, lime, rice, and I made her a Thai chicken curry dinner. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, this is the best plate of food a man has ever made for me." And I felt like a hero. And my wife doesn't like to cook, and so that was a huge plus for her. And then after we got married and after I was diagnosed, she's like, "Oh, well, if you're going to cook from scratch, why don't you just make your Thai curry?" And I told her, "I don't know how to cook Thai curry. I was using a store-bought sauce." And she's like, "Oh." And I could see regret and disappointment on her face. But um, that was the moment that I realized that I'm in very deep, serious trouble because I need to learn how to cook from scratch. And I went online and I looked for ready-made sauces that are allergen-free, that are compliant with the diet, and I didn't find any. And that's what sort of, sparked my interest into sauces in general. So after cooking for 3 years, I had some success in my career. So I decided what would make the biggest difference in my life in terms of improving the quality of my life. And I said, well, probably be improving my food because a lot of times I would just eat like a can of tuna or sardines, something that's extremely bland and boring. And I went on these different websites, meetachef.com, Take a Chef, Kitchen Remedy, etc. And I started talking to some chefs and I started working with some of them. I told them about the diet. None of them had heard of it. They had to learn quickly. And eventually I said, I really want to have my favorite dish, which is chicken tikka masala. Do you guys like chicken tikka masala?
Oh, yeah.
Love it.
So good.
Yes, awesome. And so I asked chefs with 20 plus years of experience who've gone to culinary school, and I said, can you make me chicken tikka masala, but without tomatoes or dairy or any of these seed spices or gluten and all these restrictions? And they said, no, that's impossible. You're crazy. And so I said, all right, next. And I talked to some other chefs, and they said, I've never done it before, but I'll give it a shot. And I paid them. They tried to make me something. It didn't taste anything like tikka masala. And then eventually I was introduced to my co-founder, Suhan, and I learned that he had worked at 6 Michelin star restaurants as a saucier. He worked as the head of production for Krilla Barbecue and took them from 1.5 to 11 million in sales. And in 2.5 years, he made their jarred barbecue sauce. He also worked in the executive dining program for JP Morgan and made meals for the CEO, Jamie Dimon, US presidents, and foreign dignitaries for 6 years. And they'd have a dignitary, let's say from Thailand, and he would make a Thai dish that was so amazing that that dignitary would write a thank you letter thanking Suhan for giving him something that was representative of his culture, but also one of the best Thai dishes he's ever had in his life.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And he also would do dinner parties for people in Long Island that were relatively affluent that had autoimmune diseases. So he was the perfect person. So I trusted him. I said, I'll pay you to make me 3 sauces in 3 months. One has to be tikka masala. The other 2 can be whatever you want. And after 3 months, instead of 3 sauces, he made me 8 sauces.
Nice.
And when I took a bite of the tikka masala, it brought me back to the memory of my first date with my wife, where I took her to my favorite Indian restaurant and we had chicken tikka masala. And it was the first time I experienced that memory through my taste buds for over 6 years. And at that moment, I thought to myself, this is amazing, but God forbid, what happens if Suhan decides he doesn't want to cook for me, or if he gets hit by a bus? How am I going to have my tikka masala?
Right.
So I need to create a company and put the recipes in the company so that I can make sure I can have tikka masala every single day for the rest of my life if I want to. And that was the genesis of the company.
Wow.
And at this point, I never thought I would do a CPG company. I'm a software engineer and I don't even like cooking, but I started this company because there was just my own desire to have these products because I love global cuisine. When I was 6 years old, I would go to my father's work and he had a bulletin board full of menus. And every day he would take a different menu down and he would have Thai, Indian, Chinese, Mexican, Greek, all these different cuisines. And I even got to try things like lahmacuns, which are kind of like an Armenian pizza. And
Oh,
so I I inherited my dad's taste buds.
yeah.
And once I, was diagnosed with Crohn's and a lot of my food didn't taste good or was very bland, I started to understand why the spice wars were fought between the 14th and 17th century. You
Oh.
know, Great Britain, Spain, France, they went to Southeast Asia and they were fighting over spices
Oh.
because, you know, people were literally willing to die to have tasty food. And I get it, you know. I'm
No
like,
doubt.
when I was eating bland food, I was like, I'm not excited about my life. You
Oh.
know, I hate myself. I hate everybody. I hate the world. Like everything's miserable.
Oh.
And then getting access to flavor again, it's like I'm so excited. I have so much energy.
Oh.
It's just a huge, huge difference in your life.
Oh, absolutely. It's a total
Wow.
game changer. That's amazing.
Yeah, I've heard you on other podcasts, and you were describing when you went to the doctor and you had your first colonoscopy with the diagnosis, like when he diagnosed you and showed you the inside of what was happening. Could you explain that?
Yeah, so I got pictures of my colon and the ulcers, and when I saw those images, I just wept.
Mm,
And I felt this intense guilt, shame, and disappointment in
mm,
myself that I
mm.
didn't take care of my body. But that was quickly followed by a sense of determination that I
Yes.
was going to heal from this and I was going to be healthier than I ever was before.
Mm,
And I didn't care if I had to give up, you know, all my favorite foods, or if I had to watch my family eat, In and Out, which is a really popular burger place over here in California, or, chocolate or whatever. Like I was 100% committed to doing this, whatever it took, as long as it took me. I was going to figure out what causes autoimmune disease, how it works, and how I'm going to gain control over it.
yeah. Wow. And the thing is, like, I've seen clients who've had bowel resection with Crohn's disease because they've had to remove part of the bowel that was so severely affected. And then they have an ostomy bag that they're living with, but then the symptoms can come back in another part of the GI tract. So anywhere from the mouth to the anus is Crohn's disease. And, like, I love that you're figuring out, you're trying to figure out the root cause, and
Mhm.
changed everything around with your eating style that's working. And that is incredible. And part of, from what I've been hearing on other interviews, part of your why is your daughter too, right? Like your brother has Crohn's, and your daughter, you said that potentially could be dealing with these symptoms one day.
Yes, exactly. So my brother has Crohn's as well. He was diagnosed when he was 18. I was diagnosed when I was 35.
Okay.
And when he was first diagnosed, I went online and looked for natural remedies, and I bought a few books and I gave them to him. He didn't really read them. And when I was diagnosed, I was like, well, I have to do a natural approach. That's what I asked him to do. Once I had my results, I showed him my blood test results and I said, look, I'm living symptom free without medication. And he said, well, what are you eating? And I told him what I was eating at that time. And he said, you call that living?
Mm,
And then my father, he said, if there was one thing that you could do for me, you know, of anything on Father's Day or on his birthday or whatever,
mm.
it would be to get my brother to get off the medication.
Oh,
Because I met a man about a month ago, and his wife had rheumatoid arthritis. She went on Humira, and after 15 years, she developed liver disease,
oh,
and she ended up dying in her 50s,
oh.
and she lost 3 decades probably of health span and lifespan. And he's dedicated his life to teaching people now about diet.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
what he's found is that it's really difficult because people don't have easy options. People get tired. Even I have more discipline probably than 99% of the population.
Yeah.
And even I got tired of it after 3 years. Most
Yeah.
people give up much, much sooner than that. And, so this is a real concern. Obviously, my father doesn't want something. I mean, my brother's already had shingles in his 20s. He's had several issues, even still with him being on the medication. He has to go to the hospital for transfusions every 2 months, blood tests every 3 months, annual colonoscopies.
Mm-hmm.
There can be complications with those things. If he gets an infection that's not healing, he has to get off the medication. And, you know, every time he gets an infusion, the days towards the end of a cycle and at the beginning of a cycle are really, really rough
Mm.
as you're ramping down and up into, the medication.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a good solution. Now, his son, my nephew, also was born and pretty immediately started having digestive issues. And what they do for him, he's too young. He was too young to be on medication, so he actually put him on something similar to the autoimmune protocol diet. But he doesn't do it for himself. He does it for his son because there's no other option. Um,
Oh. Huh.
you know, Earlier this week I met with a man who also has Crohn's. He initially tried doing a diet back in 2011. He didn't have success immediately, so he gave up. And then he ended up having a bowel resection, having the colostomy bag. He'd have sometimes his intestine come out of his body. He'd have to push it back in.
Oh.
He's had multiple surgeries. He's gone through several medications because they work for a year or two, and then his body builds a resistance to them. And right now, he's on 2 different biologics at the same time.
Oh.
And his inflammation is through the roof. And
Oh.
I told him about my story and my experience, and he was like, "Oh my gosh!" Like after I was on the phone with him for an hour and a half, and then for the next hour, he was reading all these resources I gave him, and then he's like, "I want to meet and talk to you again pretty soon." I said, "That's fine. I'd love to talk to you again." And he's like, "I've spent the last hour just soaking up as much of this as I can." So I just want to help people learn about, how do these diseases work? And so, for example, at one point, my doctor told me to try these very expensive probiotics that you have to get at the pharmacy called BSL-3,
Mm-hmm.
and they're refrigerated. And I tried them for several months at one point before I was diagnosed, and I had no results. And people talk a lot about, oh, it's all about the microbiome. You know, you have to have a good microbiome, but they don't really talk about, which is the dog and which is the tail.
Right.
So what I've learned since is that your body produces mucus. It's called mucin,
Mm-hmm.
and it covers your skin. And if your mucin production is disrupted, there's the good bacteria live in that mucin.
Mm-hmm.
And if your mucus is disrupted, then the bacteria die and the bad bacteria start to proliferate. But what's causing the mucin to not be produced properly? Well, it's your immune system is attacking your cells that are producing the mucin. And why are they attacking the cells? Well, they're not attacking it for no reason. They are sensing some proteins inside of those cells, like gluten, for instance, for people with celiac disease, or it could be solanine for people, or compounds from dairy, etc., for people like me who have a lot of different food allergies, and then they attack those cells. And so as soon as I got my mucus production back to normal, my body wanted to heal itself, and it was smart enough to heal itself and quickly, so long as I didn't keep introducing these compounds that would trigger the immune system.
Mm-hmm.
And so pretty quickly after I stopped eating these trigger foods, the mucus went back to normal. I did eat, drink kombucha, eat raw sauerkraut, some things that would, help with my microbiome, but it was a dramatic improvement in a relatively short period of time. And there's sort of a blind spot when it comes to food that we have in this country and maybe in the world, where people love their food so much. Like I love chocolate, and my brain didn't want to believe that chocolate could be a problem.
Yeah.
The part of my brain that loves chocolate was hiding that information from the logical part of my brain. And sometimes you need an outside party to kind of tell you, hey, maybe it's what you're eating, because people aren't always willing to do it themselves, or their brain literally, that's the last solution your brain wants to come up with, taking away your favorite foods.
Yeah.
Totally.
So if you can let go of, if everything is on the table, no pun intended, and you're willing to consider, food, you can get better very, very quickly. And now I'm almost 42 years old, and I have a personal trainer, and I'm stronger than I was when I was 20. I work out 3 days a week, and when I was 20, I worked out 6 days a week. But if you have discipline and you're eating, really good food, there's no reason why you can't be, maximally healthy. People are focused on, hey, how do I extend my longevity? I want to live, I want to extend my health span and on my lifespan. And avoiding your food triggers is probably the lowest hanging fruit for many people in terms of extending health span by 20 or 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Are those health triggers the same for everyone who is suffering from Crohn's or the autoimmune disease, or they're different for everyone?
They're different. Yeah. So that's one of the challenges,
Sure.
is that doctors can't just say, hey, everybody should go on, should just stop eating gluten.
Right.
Now, for celiac disease, you just have to stop eating gluten. But
Right.
for Crohn's disease or rheumatoid arthritis or Hashimoto's, et cetera, have you guys heard of ankylosing spondylitis?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
No. So,
Sandra, yes. Rob, no.
are you familiar with Luigi Mangione?
Another autoimmune?
So Luigi Mangione was that 20-year-old who
right.
killed the CEO of United Healthcare. He had ankylosing spondylitis, which is an autoimmune disease, and it affects your back and your spine, and it's very, very painful. And when he went to his doctors, they told him to do anti-inflammatories, probably steroids. They did surgeries on his back. The insurance companies gave him the runaround, and he was so frustrated with modern medicine and our healthcare system in the United States that he did something very, very unfortunate. And I believe that if his doctors had told him, hey, you should change your diet, look for your food triggers, none of that would have happened.
Mm-hmm.
So each person with an autoimmune disease, there are some commonalities. For example, there's the top 9 allergens: dairy, gluten, eggs, shellfish, peanuts, etc.
Right.
And those are pretty common. So the autoimmune protocol diet, you essentially eliminate all processed foods and the top maybe 15 allergens, and then you see, if that resolves all your issues, and then you start from kind of a foundation of low inflammation, and then you slowly reintroduce foods. When I initially started, I kept a food journal, and I was really only thinking about kind of the macros and, am I eating steak or am I eating chicken? Am I eating this vegetable or this fruit? But you have to think about the seasonings. They don't necessarily contribute to a large amount, to a large extent in terms of calories, and you also have to consider preservatives.
Mm-hmm.
Those, even if I were to consume 250 milligrams of steroids, that would have a profound effect. So it doesn't even have to be in large quantities. When they test for gluten, they look at 20 parts per million. The tiniest amount of gluten, like, it doesn't require a lot to cause a flare up, is my point.
Right.
So what makes it difficult is you have to avoid cross-contamination. You have to pay attention to the herbs and spices. Paprika, uh, chili powder. These are nightshades, and a lot of our favorite foods, tacos, pizza, marinara sauce, et cetera, all have nightshades and tomatoes in them. And the biggest innovation of my company is how Suhan figured out how to replicate tomato flavor without tomatoes. And
That's
it turns
amazing.
out that a tomato, it's got a lot of different dimensions. It's got acidity, sweetness. Obviously, it's red, with lycopene, and it's got umami flavor. And when you look at our ingredient list, you'll notice there's quite a few ingredients, and that's what we needed to do in order to, there's no one single vegetable that can replace a tomato. It takes 6 or 7 different ingredients to cover all of those, food compounds.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That's fascinating. What an amazing story from, I mean, as far as you see so many products on the shelf and you just think, oh, it's just some company, pushing a product to try to make money to, so they can drive a nice car or whatever. But to hear about a product where it comes from a place of need and it's an authentic story and it's helping so many people, and it makes you feel good to hear something like that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The name of the brand is Get Saucy,
I
but the
love the
name of the
name too.
company,
Yeah, it's a great name.
no, thanks. And then the name of the company is HTWTF, which stands for Heal the World Through Food.
Love it. Love
Oh,
it. Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, Get Saucy means to be bold, to
Mhm.
sort of have a glow up. Initially when I talk to people and I ask them, why are you excited about our sauces? And some people say, I'm so tired of cooking from scratch. Using your products, I could make a meal quickly and then I can just rest and take a nap. That's sort of their first goal.
Mm.
Some people say, I just want to be able to share a meal with my granddaughter because I have this allergy, she has that allergy, and now we can eat something together.
Right, right.
Some people say, I just want to have, a bolognese again, and all goals are fantastic. But what I know is that once you achieve whatever goal they set in front of themselves, they're going to just say, now what can I achieve next?
Mm-hmm.
I started with a very, I had a goal. First, it was just, hey, I want to heal my gut. Okay. Now I had a goal of, I want to enjoy my food again. Then I want to have tikka masala. I want to be stronger than I was when I was 20. Now I want to create this company and share these products with the entire world. So the goalpost can keep changing. And, I've really become saucified, if that's a word, to
Love.
to really just go after it, to make a difference, to share share this with the world.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. We have a listener question and she has Crohn's and she said, I can't eat vegetables or nuts and I just don't know, what to eat. So like from your perspective, I want to hear kind of some examples of different, meals that you might eat that are on the autoimmune protocol diet that you're on.
Yeah, so initially, when I was first diagnosed and my GI tract was not in good working order, I had to be really careful about what type of vegetables I ate or how I ate them. For example, I would make a smoothie and I would put, and I still do it today, I put, spinach and kale and beets and a banana and half an avocado and Vital Proteins protein powder and water and half a kiwi in a smoothie, and I drink that. That's kind of a green smoothie, and I'll eat some chicken sausage in the morning. And then what I did a lot of in the very beginning is I would make a soup, and that way the vegetables were really soft and very easy to digest.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, if I ate raw vegetables, like even if I ate a salad, it would make me constipated.
Mm.
And one of the most important and critical nutritional studies that I found, there was a study done in 2017, and they had a group, I think it was 15 or 16 patients, and they did the autoimmune protocol diet. They had Crohn's disease, and 11 out of 15 of them were able to get to remission in 6 weeks. And
Mm.
that was amazingly hopeful. First of all, 73%, that's higher than Entyvio in terms of effectiveness. And
Wow.
the only reason why it was only 73%, it would have been higher,
Mm-hmm.
but some of the patients, they didn't follow the protocol precisely. They couldn't do the diet, or in one case, somebody ate a mountain of salad and they got a bowel impaction
Oh, yeah.
and it got stuck in their colon, let's say, and they had to go to the hospital and have it be removed.
Mm.
But if they had been drinking smoothies, if they had been, you know, eating soup, I don't think that would have happened.
Hmm.
So there is sort of a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. Now I can have salad and I eat large salads, but you can't start there. It's like you have a pipe, and the pipe is not flowing smoothly, and then you can't just try to force a ton of water through it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a well smooth running pipe and kind of get into it gradually. The nice thing
Mm-hmm.
about our products is they do contain lots of vegetables. They're extremely nutrient dense,
Mm.
and they're cooked.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so you can make your protein, you add the sauce, and maybe some cauliflower rice, or depending on what you're omitting, and you can have a meal in 10 to 15 minutes. So
Nice.
they're great for parents who are trying to get their kids to eat more protein, but want to have clean ingredients. Like if you want to use our orange chicken.
Yep.
And I recently talked to a doctor of geriatric medicine, and she told me that she got pulled into a senior living facility, and there was a woman who was losing weight very rapidly, and they were very concerned, and they wanted to run thousands and thousands of dollars of tests on her. And the doctor said, "Let me talk to her and let me see what's going on." So she talked to the patient, and she said, "Hey, what's going on?" And she said, "Well, the food here is extremely bland and boring. They
Mm.
make me the same boring sandwich every
Mm.
single day, and
Mm-hmm.
I can't hardly force myself to eat it anymore,
Oh.
so I'm basically starving to death." So the doctor said, "Okay, this seems like a relatively easy problem to solve. I'll just go talk to the people who work in food service
Mm.
and ask them, hey, can you make her something different? Can you, make her not the same thing every day, or can you make
Mm-hmm.
it taste better?" And the people in food service said, "Look, she has all these dietary restrictions and food allergies. We don't have the skills, we don't have the time, and we don't have the
Mm.
ingredients to
Mm.
make food for her." And that's where, in addition to selling the products directly to consumers on our website, on Amazon, and eventually in retail, we want to make them available to senior living facilities. When I travel, for example, last summer I went to London and I flew first class, and they had a kosher meal, they had a gluten-free meal, they had a vegan meal, but they didn't have an allergy-friendly meal that I
Mm.
could eat.
Mm.
So I was eating a banana, and my wife and kids were having filet mignon, and I was the one paying for the whole thing.
Right.
And then we went to the hotel, and it was a five-star hotel called the Langham. And I call room service, and I'm like, "Hey, can you make me something?" And I told them my allergies, and they made me a steak with salt and steamed vegetables and just plain rice. And then I go to restaurants, and I have to bring a can of tuna and an avocado with me while I'm traveling around in Europe,
Mm.
because none of the menus have anything I can eat. So I'm sitting there extremely awkward while my
Mm.
family's ordering off the menu, and I'm eating out of a can like a cat.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So one of the goals I have as well is to be able to provide our products to food service, to hotels, to restaurants, to airlines, so that they can provide options for people. And when you're in a group, and there's one person, who has a lot of food allergies, that they don't have to sit there watching everybody else eat. They can actually participate and also enjoy the experience as well. So I literally eat, sleep, and breathe the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I just want to feel, I've always just wanted to feel normal like
Mm-hmm.
everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to make that available to everybody. And I see a world where, I'll be able to go on the airlines and the restaurants, hotels, and there's going to be options on the menu, even for people with lots of food allergies.
Yes.
Question about your sauces. You were saying with the food triggers that different people have different triggers. Are your sauces sort of made specifically for certain conditions?
Yeah, so there's definitely people who have certain allergies. For example, our sauces have garlic and onions, which are alliums.
Right.
And so for people who need to avoid garlic and onions, they probably wouldn't be able to enjoy our products. I've met people who have coconut allergy. Some of our products have coconut. In general, our products, they're certified organic. They don't have any ultra processed food ingredients. They're, all ingredients whose names you would recognize, butternut squash, carrots, beets, things like that. And they're top probably 15 allergen free.
Okay.
So you have the top 9 allergens,
Right.
and then nightshades and several others. The nightshades are, as I was mentioning, that is sort of unlocks, being able to replicate tomato flavor is the really big unlock to a lot of these global
That's
cuisines.
huge.
So that's what makes us, other than being certified organic and, you know, being free of the top 9 allergens, the fact that we're also free from nightshades and a few other ingredients is really what sets us apart. Obviously, we have an amazing chef. I basically found the best chef that I could possibly find, and now I'm making him available to everyone
That's
for free.
amazing.
That's
But,
awesome.
but you keep that recipe locked away in a safe, I'm sure, right?
Yep. The
Yeah.
recipes, are well protected.
Yeah. No, smart. That's
really
amazing.
awesome.
Tell me more about your sauces too. I'm curious. Like, is it just like a jar of sauce? Or are you offering other products? And is there like recipe ideas that come with the sauces? Is that sort of how it
Yes.
works?
So right now we have for sale our tikka masala, and we're in the process of producing our next 2 SKUs. And by the end of the year, we want to have 6. We have, salsa verde. We have wait lists on our website, so
Oh,
we're
nice.
excited for people to join the wait list, and the people on the wait list will get first dibs. Salsa verde, orange chicken, Thai curry, barbecue sauce, and our tomato-free marinara sauce. And then we also have our seasoning, which is our taco seasoning. We have a bunch of products that we want to make after these products, so we'll have an entire library, and you could enjoy a different global cuisine for lunch and dinner every day of the week. That's my dream. That's where we want to get to. We're definitely open to suggestions about future flavors. We've had some people say, "Hey, I'd love something that was like a cheesy flavor or a dairy-like flavor without dairy, or you know, chili powder, to make chili, et cetera, et cetera." So we do have like a long list of items that we want to do research on,
Hmm.
um, but we're focused initially we want to get these SKUs out, and then we'll be making more next year. I mean, I'd love to ramp up R&D, have a virtual army that Suhan could work with that could just crank out, eventually having 20, 30, 50 different sauces, seasonings, condiments, and dressings. So people, have to email me and say, "Brian, stop making so many flavors. I don't know what to choose from."
That's awesome. Yeah.
Not a bad
That would
problem
be
to
a really
have.
good problem to have.
Yeah, right. It sounds like you guys love the challenge. Like you're getting all these requests. Can you make this or that? It sounds like you sort of thrive on the challenge of it too, which is ideal in your situation. I mean, that's part of the fun by the sounds of it.
Yeah, it's what makes life exciting.
Hmm.
There's some like Buddhist saying that the snail that's climbing Mount Everest is the happiest.
Yeah.
You know, like I after I sold my last company, I was actually kind of depressed because I'm like, I have no purpose now.
Oh, you have no
Like,
challenge, right? Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
and now I need a new challenge. I have a lot of energy. I have a lot of determination. Like, what do I want to do next? And then, this sauce idea kind of came up, and here we are. But yeah, I mean, I'm not a person who can kind of like sit on the beach, unfortunately, and just like, hey, let's go travel the world. I'd love to travel more, but traveling is not that enjoyable for me
Mm.
because of the food.
Hmm.
So that's part of the reason why I don't like to travel very much. And I'm just so excited about it. At this point, it's like I want to make it great for myself to travel, but I also want to make it amazing for everybody to travel. And for my daughter started having a lot of food sensitivities. She's not sensitive to as many things as I am yet, but she's sensitive to dyes, gums, citric acid, which is made by using a type of black mold called Aspergillus niger that most people don't know about, feeding on like sugar and corn refuse.
Hmm.
And so, she can't force herself to eat super bland food like I can, you know, and so I want to have this company be around for her so that she can enjoy her food and be able to live symptom free without medication. And so I'm part of, she's 13 now. I'm doing it for her, I'm doing it for my brother, I'm doing it for my father, I'm doing it for myself, I'm doing it for everybody in the world who's dealing with autoimmune diseases, or anybody who has really, there's a lot of chronic diseases, people who are cancer survivors. I've talked to people who are interested in using our products so that their immune system can be in tip-top shape, because that's important for people who have cancer. People who are type 2 diabetic, they want something with no added sugar, but they also want the food to taste good. They don't necessarily want to have to be on, different drugs like Ozempic. And there's sort of this commonality of avoiding processed foods. Weston A. Price was a dentist in the 1930s who wanted to understand why Americans were getting so many cavities after the advent of refined sugar and processed seed oils. And he visited all these different groups around the world. He visited the Eskimos. He saw what they were eating, thousands of calories of fish, and he looked in their mouths and they didn't have cavities. And he visited tribes in Africa that were drinking like 3,000 calories of milk, raw milk, and different groups that were eating mostly a plant-based diet. And it was kind of confusing. He's like, you know, there's a lot of people who are eating different things and they're doing great. And they don't have a lot of heart disease, they don't have diabetes, but we're doing, poorly in the US. And what they have in common is they were focused on whole foods and not a bunch of processed foods and refined sugar.
Right, right.
So what I would love to, export our products to other countries, and instead of exporting, Coca-Cola and McDonald's and heart disease and type 2 diabetes, from this country,
Yeah.
we can get Saucy, and we can export health, and that would be amazing.
I love your goals, Brian. Yeah, they're huge. It's so refreshing to hear. Sorry, carry on.
So the one thing that I did, which I think is somewhat unique, is when I recovered from Crohn's, I did it with food and food alone. I didn't go to physical therapy. I didn't go, to a psychiatrist. I didn't do, not to say that any of those things are bad. I didn't take a ton of vitamins. I didn't take a ton of supplements. It was just food and food alone. And it was relatively inexpensive and quick. And that, I think, is the real unlock, that we could reduce healthcare costs in the United States by probably at least $1 trillion if we change the food system. And yes, we'd probably spend more on food than we do today. Maybe we would spend twice as much on food, or 50% more.
You mean
But
like individual families?
it's something like $2 trillion. I think in the United States we spend somewhere between $2 and $2.5 trillion a year on food, and we spend 4.5 trillion, or maybe it's 5 trillion now, on healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
I think we could spend a lot less on healthcare and more on food. Gluten-free products generally are twice as expensive as the regular products, and our sauces are going to be more expensive than the regular sauces. But the cost of let's say one of these biologics, like Entyvio, as a for instance, is $30,000 to $50,000 a year. So it's still much more cost efficient to solve problems by changing your diet. You'd spend a lot less than $30,000 to $50,000 a year per person who has Crohn's disease, for instance, even if you gave them free food. That's why medically tailored meals are becoming so popular.
Oh yeah, you're preaching to the converted.
Yeah.
I've been trying to say this for 30 years. Nutrition, yeah, it's just so powerful, and it's it's what we eat. It's just hard because people do not like to change their habits, and food is such a ingrained, like we're on autopilot when we go grocery shopping and what we make in our homes. So when you went through everything you did and discovered that this worked for you, and then you've developed this product because of it, that's an amazing story. And that's like, yeah, it's incredible. And it really is, it's got you fired up to help others that might be, affected with autoimmune diseases.
If you look at the bell curve, you have the early adopters, and then you have early mainstream adopters, and then you have mainstream, and then you have the later mainstream, and then eventually the laggards. Right now, we're helping the early adopters, and we're super excited for people to join the Saucy squad. So we have like a LinkedIn group, we have our Facebook group. We're happy to just grow this community as quickly as people want to join it. But I understand. Look, I have my own brother, who I share a lot of DNA with. He's not doing a diet. Like, I understand the challenge better than probably most people. And we grew up in the same house. We had the same parents. We ate the same food for many years, and we have very, very different relationships with food.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a lot of empathy for people who struggle. And what we want to do is just make it easier. So if you look at our website, we have this thing that says swap that sauce. So instead of using, if you're already using sauces that come out of a jar, instead of buying that jar, buy our jar. So it can fit into your life just as you're doing it today. And then again, the reason why we want to get into food service, restaurants, some people just want to DoorDash. If restaurants had an allergy-friendly option and people could DoorDash it, that would make it easy for them.
Yeah. Oh, I see it in the future. This will
Mm-hmm.
definitely, I'm sure it'll be, we'll look back and go, oh, this is when it started, like, because I think it's a lot of people are having issues with their health and autoimmune diseases are on the rise, and people need solutions like this. Like, this is that's why I wanted to talk to you, because I just think, well, your story is amazing and it highlights, just the debilitating effects of Crohn's disease and the fact that you could get it under control with your nutrition. That's incredible. I love that. And
Yeah, I
then
love that.
you developed the sauce, like you basically found this amazing chef and as you said, you're giving him to the world, like with your sauces. I love that. So amazing.
I can't wait to see where you are in 5 years, Brian. You're gonna
Yeah.
have a whole aisle dedicated to your products. It's gonna be amazing to see where you go from here.
No, thank you guys so much.
I just love your website too. I'm just looking at it, getsaucy.com, and it's got your story there. It's got have a sauce flavor you want us to recreate. So you're asking the public to you want some input into flavors and different sauces that you want to be challenged with making, right?
Yes, this is either the best idea that anyone's ever heard of or the worst idea.
Yeah, you got to be careful what you wish for, right?
I think in general with this company, I put things in those two categories. It's like this is either the best idea that anyone's ever done or the worst idea.
Yeah,
Well, you can change it. I
fun.
mean, you could always pivot. Like if you're getting inundated with every kind of thing under the sun, you could. That's funny. It's a good way to grow though. Like, cause it's a pretty new, you just started this when
Yeah, we just launched our first sauce, tikka masala, 3 months ago.
oh,
The company's been around for about a year. It took us a long time to get our supply chain. We had to source large-scale ingredients from organic farms. We had to get our organic certification.
wow.
You have to get every single ingredient. It has to be organic certified, and you have to get all their documentation. And they changed a bunch of rules last year related to organic certification, so everybody had to get recertified. And there was an enormous backlog. And I'm incredibly impatient, and so it's been brutal waiting to get this stuff going. But we're trying to move as quickly and as efficiently as possible because I'm super excited about the products. I know a lot of people are excited about the products, and the sooner we get them out there, the more people we can help and grow. I want to create an engine of creating products, then creating more products and a sustainable growth engine. So eventually we'll have this entire library of different products. People want dressings, people want seasonings, sauces, condiments. I mean, I want to give people an experience that they thought they would never be able to experience again.
Enjoying food, right? You want them to enjoy food again, it sounds.
My father gets heartburn when he eats tomatoes, and my mom is allergic to dairy. And they used to love eating Indian food, but they hadn't eaten it in over 10 years. And now they can eat our tikka masala. And they're like,
Nice.
this is amazing. We're having tikka masala. And our tomato-free marinara, I sent some samples to my parents as well. And my mom was like, hey, I can make this for your dad. And my mom hates to cook too. And she's like, I can do this. It's like just cook some meat, and pour the sauce on it and then done. And it's like, yeah, it's good and it's easy and it's simple, easy, quick, and accessible and healthy. The whole process, so cooking the food, is fun and easy. Then eating the food, it tastes good, and how you feel afterwards. We want that entire experience to be amazing. And
Mm.
that is what these products can do.
That is awesome.
Yeah, yeah. And it's amazing you were saying about like the different dressings and seasonings and sauces and condiments. And, with we've been doing this podcast for over 3 years, and we do like a midweek mini nutrition nuggets, and some of them are on sauces and dressings and seasonings. And those get so like people are interested in finding more flavor for their food. And that's
Hmm.
all another reason why I wanted to talk to you, because I think this Get Saucy is just, it will meet the demand for people that really have to be careful with ingredients. And, with the way that you guys have developed and created these amazing sauces with the top 9 allergens not in them. Like you said, like there's no, the gums and the preservatives and the refined sugars, and they're organic ingredients, and it's not bland. Like you on your website, it's like no bland food allowed kind of thing. I love it.
I've had like a lot of really amazing conversations. We went to the Future Food Tech conference a couple months ago, and we had a booth and we did a cooking demo and had 150 people try our tikka masala, and the videos are on YouTube and you can check them out. And somebody came to our booth who worked at Kraft Heinz, and she's like, "Hey, I'm the nutritionist responsible for the Primal Kitchen products, so just so you know." And I said, "Oh, that's amazing. Here, try our tikka masala, try our taco seasoning." And she's like, "Whoa, there's so much flavor in this. I didn't even think this category could have this much flavor." And she had this expression on her face like, "Oh crap," because she knew that there's
Oh, Kraft.
competition.
No, I'm just joking.
Yeah, there you go. And
That's funny.
when I went to the conference as well, I went to one of the talks and it was a panel and everybody was talking about how they were worried about RFK Jr. and him banning food dyes and artificial colors and flavors and things like that. And they said, look, we've tried to give people, flavorless, colorless, bran flakes when I was at Kellogg's or General
Right.
Mills or whatever 10 years ago, and nobody ate them.
Yes.
And so that's why we have to, people want Lucky Charms with all these artificial colors and flavors,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why we make it. And I was shaking my head thinking, so there's only two options. Like either you have bland, flavorless food or you have food full of chemicals. Like there's no third option that you make food that actually tastes good, that's good for you, which is what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, this is either the best idea or the worst idea. And, it's a natural product. So when you eat an Oreo, every time you open a box of Oreos, it always tastes the same, right? But this is a natural product, like a wine.
Mm-hmm.
So if the rain and the sun and the seasons, the beets are, beetier, they're sweeter that year. It can change the flavor profile of the product. It may eventually be like, hey, this was a really good year of Get Saucy. That you have it's that sort of thing like of there is going to be some variability in terms of color and there will be some variability in terms of flavor, but we're going to make it taste good. And we test my chef will test the product every season and you have to make a little bit of tweaks as you go along. But I'm not willing to give up the fact that we're not going to use any processed, ultra processed food ingredients. We're going to use vegetables as God intended,
Yeah.
and that's all part of it. So it's changing people's expectations a little bit about food.
Hmm.
It's not going to taste the exact same every time you open the jar every single time every single year.
Well, every apple tastes a little bit different. Every orange, every
Exactly.
like natural like fruit and vegetable that comes out of the ground
Yeah,
or off the tree, it's going to be a little bit different. And I think that's, yeah.
You don't expect that from a jar, though. Like I understand what Brian's saying. People are so used to opening a jar and it always tasting exactly the same every time from year to year, and that's going to have to be something we relearn if we're going to be using these products, right? Because it is a natural. I never thought about that before, but you're totally right.
yeah. So we're a little bit over. I have the gift of gab, so I apologize.
That's okay. No, that's great. We really appreciate this great information. One last question we ask all our guests. If you're going to a potluck dinner, now that you have your own sauces here, I think I know what the answer is going to be, but what would you bring to a meal with others for the potluck?
Oh, I would love to bring tikka masala. That's my favorite dish, and I love to share it with everybody.
It sounds fantastic. I can't wait to try it. Is it going to be available globally or just in the US to begin with? Or
Yeah, so right now it's only available on Amazon and our website in the US,
okay.
but we do plan to expand, and we have interest in the UK, Canada, New Zealand, Australia.
Awesome.
Autoimmune disease is not just limited to the US. It's
No.
10% of the population in many countries.
Yeah,
Oh, that's amazing.
absolutely.
I'm looking forward to talking to you again, Brian. Like I said, I can't wait to see what you're going to be doing in 5 years, and we'd love to follow.
You don't need to wait 5 years. I mean, maybe in 6 months.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I
mean,
6 months is better.
I'm on a different. I tell people, like, I'm in startup time, and it's really hard to kind of go back to normal time.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite comedians says, he's like, I used to seize the day, but now I have to seize 2 days, 3 days just to cop the same buzz.
That's what you're feeling. That's awesome. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Oh, well, that's awesome. And when with a lot of our guests, one day Rob and I are going to go on a road trip around North America, and we're going to visit everybody and have one of their potluck items. And I'd love to taste your the Get Saucy the way you do it.
Yes, let's do it.
That sounds super fun.
That's so awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And yeah, I'm hoping that all the listeners will check out your website, getsaucy.com, and just see the story, see your pictures, look at the amazing sauces that you guys have developed, and watch for it coming out on the shelves.
Awesome. Yeah, and don't take my word for it. Try the sauces for yourself and let us know what you think.
Exactly. Let the public have their feedback, because that sells more than anything, I think. So, yeah, looking forward to talking to you again, Brian. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Wow, that was really interesting talking with Brian.
Yeah, he's got a lot of passion. I loved hearing how he looked at the root cause. I liked hearing that. At the very beginning of the episode, he said that when he was in college, I believe, and he was working on his keyboard, and he got sort of some issues from that, and he didn't want to be on medication to solve the issues. He wanted to figure out the root cause, and then he took that same approach when he was diagnosed with Crohn's, and it's kind of rare. I'm guessing that, people go to the doctor, they usually do what the doctor suggests, and then they go home and they pop their pills and problem solved, sort of, Band-Aid wise. So it was really refreshing to hear him just sort of tackle this head on to make his life better. And now he wants to make everyone suffering from this feel better. It's a really great story.
Yeah. And it really shows his mission and the reason behind why he created the Get Saucy.
Yeah.
That's the cool thing. Like, he's got, after debilitating health condition, he basically found a solution for himself, and he wants to share that with others and share Suhan Lee, the chef, and share his delicious recipes with others who can't have a lot of these ingredients that might be triggering for their inflammation.
Yeah. And it's such intriguing work too. I mean, just the whole process of finding something that works that still tastes like the original. That's got to be really tricky but exciting. And like they must have a huge celebration when they come up with something it's like, hey, we got a winner. This is the new sauce that tastes like whatever it's supposed to taste like, but is full of the right ingredients that aren't going to create issues for people who are suffering from these autoimmune diseases and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a really fascinating process.
Yeah, absolutely. Trying to source all of the organic produce and spices, and just getting that combination of flavors to replicate, like a tomato, for instance, like tomato sauce. which is a hard thing to do. It was really interesting, his description of how to combine those different flavors.
Yeah, I've never even thought it describing what a tomato tastes like. I mean, that in itself is difficult, but to like sort of pinpoint those individual flavors and then be able to replicate them with other sort of safe ingredients. That's challenging stuff. And, hats off to his whole team that's working on that, because it's hopefully going to make a huge difference.
Yeah, and I encourage people to check out his website, getsaucy.com.
Great name, too.
Yeah,
such a great name.
And the story and the products that are available, and just look into that, because I think it might help if you are trying to make your food more tasty and you're sick of eating kind of bland diet, and you don't have much interest in eating because the food's so boring. This might actually help spark your interest again.
Absolutely. And we'll definitely be keeping up to date with Brian's story. And as his products are released, we will link them on our social media just so that you can follow along. And obviously, we'll share the links to his website, Amazon page, and that sort of thing in the show notes so that you can check out the products that he has available. If you want to know more about what we're doing, you can check out our website. It's mywifethedietitian.com. Got a great blog there. We've also got a weekly newsletter you can subscribe to. That's free to join. You can email us your questions at mywifetherd@gmail.com. You can also follow us on our social media pages. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Feel free to reach out to us there as well. If you're liking the show, let us know. You can rate and review on whatever podcast player you're using. We love hearing your feedback. It's super helpful for us. It helps us to know that we're on the right track with giving you the information that you want. Sharing with a friend, that's also super helpful. If you can do that for us, that would be much appreciated. We will be back on Wednesday with our midweek mini episode, Nutrition Nuggets. So until then, have a fantastic week. Thanks for joining us today on My Wife the Dietitian. If you like what you heard, don't be shy. Leave us a comment or review, and be sure to share our podcast with your friends. If you'd like to hear more, hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on our social media pages for updates, episode trailers, and other odds and ends. For more info and links on what we discussed on today's episode, check the show notes. We'll be back next week with another informative and fun-filled episode.